Hello, I'm Matt Reardon, and thanks for watching this March 15th Wednesday evening West weather update brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. To start, we are looking just at the last 7 days of total precipitation across the West, and there has been a lot of it. We had two atmospheric river events move through, mostly focusing a lot of that rainfall, the moisture and snow on the state of California, although other areas out west received some snowfall and some rainfall from this as well. Some of these values are really getting off the chart here. I'll pull this down just so we can see that color bar down here. That's showing us how many inches of rainfall have fallen across the West. If we look specifically at some locations in California, the Sierra Nevadas, now much of this falling as snowfall, upwards of 20 inches, probably exceeding that in some locations in terms of liquid equivalent. Just extreme numbers here as a result of these March atmospheric river events. Some of the coastal mountain ranges on the central and northern coast of California also exceeding 10 inches of liquid equivalent. Much of that was rainfall. It flowed into some of the valleys along the coastlines there. There were evacuation warnings, orders out. Kern County in the Central Valley, Tulare Lake area has seen flooding. Monterey, Watsonville, the Santa Cruz County area seeing a lot of flooding from this. It's just a widespread, impactful event. It's not even to mention the wind reports. We saw large trees being toppled in parts of the North Valley, the Sacramento Valley, San Francisco, the airport there recording a gust of 70 miles an hour. This was a very impactful storm, unfortunately, that impacted California just over the last 48 hours, and then we had another one at the end of last week as well. These combined have brought a lot of inclement weather and impactful events just to the state of California. We also had snowfall up in the northern Colorado Rockies. This was an area where we were looking to receive a little bit more water this year, and then certainly over in the Cascades and the coastal regions of the Pacific Northwest did see some rainfall and snowfall out of this as well. The reservoirs, the spillways across California have been opened in many locations. This one here specifically is Lake Oroville, which opened up that spillway. That's been running for some time now over the last few days, mostly as a precaution, keeping Lake Oroville at respectable levels here in preparation for these upcoming events that have just come through. Haven't seen issues there with the dams or anything like that. That's good news. We're not seeing any problems there looking out into the future, in the immediate future in the forecast, but it is something we're going to be mindful of just given the water levels are rising in some of these reservoirs. We'll take a look a little bit closer at some of those as we go forward here in the video. This is just looking at the evacuation orders for Monterey County here, the Salinas River Valley. All the way up to Monterey, up toward Watsonville, the Pajaro River, which broke through a levee there, inundating the community of Pajaro near Watsonville. That was a big news event, unfortunate. That has been, I think they're getting closer to closing that up now here today, as of the day on Wednesday. But the evacuation orders and warnings still out. Anywhere you see red here is an evacuation order. The yellow is a warning where an order could be imminent. And this was the story across a number of locations, not just the Salinas River Valley, but we also saw evacuations in the Central Valley where flooding, standing water was an issue in some of these agricultural fields and communities as well. Looking closer just at that Pajaro River levee breakage there, you can see the break in the levee there and just a tremendous amount of water overflowing the banks of the Pajaro River, making its way into some of this agricultural and farmland, and unfortunately, and eventually flooding that community of Pajaro, where a number of folks have been displaced as a result of that. Another story of this, not only the water, but the snowfall. We are at record levels in terms of the snowpack in the southern Sierra Nevadas. The central and northern Sierra Nevadas are near record levels as well. We're getting very close to some of these record years in terms of snowfall across California, if we haven't already met them in some locations. This map that we're looking at specifically here, this is the total snow water equivalent held up in that snowpack right now across the Sierra Nevadas. And some of these numbers, they're in inches here. The units are really impressive. We're talking 80 to even in some locations here, 100 inches of liquid equivalent. Much of that is going to melt as we go into the summer here, and it has one way to go, which is down into the hydrology, some of the river networks here in California. So we have a lot more water coming, even though we don't necessarily have, maybe anything in the immediate next few days in terms of an atmospheric river forecast. We do have more water coming to California. It's just locked up right now in some of those snowpacks. And this story is similar across the West, where we've seen a snowy winter, maybe not meeting the levels here of California, but the upper Colorado River Basin, we'll talk about that in a bit, Lake Powell, Lake Mead running really low levels right now in terms of those reservoirs. But as we melt some of the snow going into these summer months here, that water level will continue to rise. Looking at some of those specifically, just for California to start here are all the reservoirs, the major ones, some of the minor ones left off of this map, specifically here. Lake Oroville, we talked about that, now at 80% of capacity, running 120% of its historical average. That number in green there, those spillways have been open, keeping Oroville from reaching capacity. That's good news. It's going to take quite a bit more of these sequential atmospheric river events, I think, to get into sort of extreme danger territory there. That's not expected right now, so that's good news. You can see some of these other large ones, which were running at low levels last year. Now we're well exceeding that historical average, 154% in McClure, Don Pedro at 115%, Pine Flat and Millerton have exceeded their historical averages as well. We saw some evacuation warnings associated with some of those as a result of the spillways opening up. So these reservoir levels are already up, already above that historical average. We're expecting those to increase in the next 2 to 3 months. This is going to be a hydrology that's stressed, but at least right now, no imminent danger associated with these. If we look at some other areas across the west, if I zoom this map up now, eastern Oregon, this was an area where we talked about earlier in the year needing some more water out of the spring rainfall sequence here. Some of these reservoirs still running very low. Now we talked about how as we warm up throughout the spring here, getting into early summer, I expect some of these to improve in terms of their water levels. If we jump over to Idaho here, you can see the story looks a little bit better in terms of their reservoirs here. But again, this is a long, ongoing, it's a slow burn process of melting that snowpack and building up some of these reservoirs. Looking across the snow water equivalent across the entire western region now, obviously we covered California. This dark blue color here is where we're running 200% above that normal snowpack. And if you look specifically at some of these Sierra Nevada locations, 320% of normal, just extreme values here in the southern Sierra Nevadas. We're at record snowpack. But even across the west, Nevada, Utah, the upper Colorado River Basin here, northern Arizona, southern and eastern Utah, southwest Colorado. Lake Powell is at at or near record low levels right now here as we got into mid-March. Those are expected to increase, those water levels, as again we warm up into these spring and summer months. So good news on the way in terms of getting this excess snowpack here in this 2022-2023 winter. If we go further north, we've been talking about the northern Colorado Rockies, eastern Oregon, eastern Washington, Idaho, Salmon River Mountains. This was an area that we wanted a little bit more snow. If I take you over to the current drought monitor map, you see the northern interior mountains, the northern Colorado Rockies, eastern Oregon, still dealing with that drought that we were hanging on to from these last few years here. Now that's walked back quite a bit in California. We're still seeing it hang on here in Idaho, Oregon, and some parts of Washington. Now, I'm expecting this to improve in this next drought update here tomorrow on Thursday, March 16th, as a result of some of the recent rain and snowfall. But what will really improve this over time is melting that snowpack, which is now, as a result of some of these recent systems, while focusing on California, we have improved the snowpack situation in Idaho and Oregon and Washington, now running above average for March 15th here. Again, that will melt, and that story will improve as we go through the year in 2023. Jumping ahead here, this is a current all hazards map from NOAA, just a way to get an idea of what kind of weather we're seeing, what might be a concern in the next 48 hours. If you look across the west right now, winter storm warnings in the northern Sierras. That is really as a result of the last few snowstorms that came through, as a result of the atmospheric rivers. Great Falls, the Golden Triangle of Montana, that area here, we see these winter storm warnings and advisories out. Those are as a result of the snowfall moving through right now. This is really exiting the area, this latest atmospheric river event that came through Monday and Tuesday. Now on Wednesday, we talked about how it would be waning at this point. It's doing this, exiting the area in Arizona, southern Utah, parts of Colorado, and New Mexico, still seeing some of those pink winter storm warnings. Now we do have flood watches out for parts of Nevada, parts of Arizona. We're having a lot of rainfall move through right now. Southern California, still seeing those flood watches in the Los Angeles metro area. We talked about how Southern California would see more rainfall at the tail end of this event. So while it started really Monday night in earnest, lingering through the day, on Tuesday it shifted its impacts more toward the south. So we've seen more events flooding events impacting Southern California overnight on Tuesday into Wednesday morning, I should say, here today. If we look at the current satellite imagery, we can see that a low pressure system centered somewhere over the Intermountain West in the interior here. You can see all the cloud field associated with that. Some lingering rain moving through Southern California, more rain in Arizona, Utah. This storm system will materialize and eject off the Continental Divide in the next 48 hours, prompting a low pressure system and a winter storm warning issued now for parts of Minnesota, or at least winter storm watches. If we jump back to the all hazards page here, we can see winter storm warnings in Nebraska and winter storm watches in this blue color here, winter weather advisories in southeast Minnesota. We're expecting quite a bit of winter weather in the interior of the country now as a result of the same event moving off toward the east. Looking at the current rainfall for the Southwest, just get an idea of where this event is. Now, really, again, over Arizona, southern Utah, seeing some rain there. Moving out of the picture, lingering showers and rainfall in far southern California. But finally here, after 48 hours, moving up here to 72 hours, this event waning across the western region. If we get this forecast, precipitation valid as of Wednesday evening here. You can see that event now moving out of the western region. Lingering showers here, 1 p.m. valid Wednesday. If I take this through the evening on Wednesday into the early morning hours of Thursday at 5 a.m., weather clearing up. Temperatures will start to warm up as we get some of the clouds and precipitation out of the way in terms of the western region here. As we go through the day on Thursday, we continue to see clear weather, and that seems to be the case. Perhaps a small system here moving through the far southern reaches of California and Arizona. Just light rain showers expected at this time. Can't rule out some snow showers, light ones at that in the far southern Sierra Nevadas. But that system moves through over the weekend, keeping much of the region clear. Perhaps something of a weak system coming through Sunday evening. Does not look very potent in terms of snow, rainfall, or wind. But really what we're watching, this is the ECMWF here, is the potential for another system moving through early next week. This forecast here from the ECMWF valid as of Tuesday. Now, that's pretty far out. We're talking nearly a week out in the forecast. The specifics of this event we cannot hammer down now yet. And if I update this forecast, this is the 0Z run from earlier today. We'll see if we have the 12Z in. We do not, but we will look at that in just a few moments here. The specifics of this we don't have hammered out yet, but we are seeing confidence in some sort of early week event next week. Now, whenever we're forecasting out kind of that 7-day time frame, I will often look to the jet stream for clues. So we'll just do that now. We'll make this forecast jet stream across the Pacific Ocean valid as of Wednesday evening here. You can see there's that low pressure system we talked about ejecting out into the interior of the United States, prompting that winter storm in the northern Midwest. If I take this forecast out through Thursday, clear weather expected for much of the West. We do see one storm system moving through in the southern portion of that western region over the weekend, perhaps bringing some rain and showers to Southern California and Arizona. But as that jet stream focuses more on California, and that early week time frame, you can almost see that connection, right, from Hawaii toward the west coast of the United States, opening up the possibility of yet another atmospheric river type event early next week, sometime between Monday and Wednesday. It could even be a series of events or two events that come through in quick succession in terms of actual low pressure systems. Again, the details aren't clear now. We're just seeing consistency. This is the GFS. Just the GFS model. If I take us over and look at the ECMWF, now looking at the 12Z run, this one valid as of Sunday, March 19th, take this through midday Sunday, you can see that strong southern extension of the jet stream in the Pacific that's helping to bring up the moisture into California. Now the look on the European that we're looking at here, the ECMWF, European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, if we look at this one here, it has more convergence over California. And what I mean by that is the jet stream, this ridge here, this southward shift or component in it over California will prompt more convergence over the western U.S. That will tend to reduce precipitation chances. Where we have convergence aloft in the atmosphere, we tend to reduce precipitation and interesting weather. In this case, it would be over California. Now, as I take this from Sunday into Monday, you'll notice that wave opening up a little bit, where we lose that southern component of the jet stream. Now we're more zonal, or even out of the southwest, which will help usher in more moisture out of the Pacific Ocean. If I flip us back over to the GFS for the same time period, kind of March 19th through March 22nd, let's bring this back. Let's make it valid as of Sunday midday. We see that convergence ridge in the eastern Pacific, some convergence over California. As I take this out through Monday and Tuesday, You'll notice it opens itself up a bit. We get this zonal flow out of the Pacific, helping to bring more Pacific moisture in. And it's a little more potent, a little more amplified of a system. It sticks around through Wednesday, even into late Wednesday, not really exiting the western U.S. until Thursday, as it ejects a similar low pressure system out into the central United States. That leads me to believe the GFS is a bit more aggressive on the rainfall and snowfall potential for California and other states out west versus the ECMWF. These is a difference we're looking at right now. Now, it's a week out, something to be mindful of. The GFS is a bit more aggressive than the European model. We tend to lean toward the European model, all else equal. But that being said, it's a bit too far out right now to pick one over the other. Again, I would guess just as a result of the GFS being a little more potent, a little more amplified, it would increase rainfall and snowfall potential across the west. And with even a bit more of a southwest component here, we may be able to get some more rainfall and snow into the northern Colorado Rockies. And if we go ahead and compare the two models here for rainfall over the next 10 days or so, the image on the left, that's the ECMWF. You can see quite a bit of rainfall as a result of the system coming through early next week. We'll probably bring more snowfall to the Sierra Nevadas, quite a bit more rainfall to Southern California. But if we compare that to the GFS on the right, you can see the GFS much more aggressive in terms of the precip. As much as 8 more inches of precipitation equivalent across the Sierra Nevadas, with more precipitation and snowfall moving in to the interior west and the northern Colorado Rockies, even the coastlines of Oregon, Washington, and the Cascades as well. So that's a difference we're noting. Early next week, we'll keep a close eye on this system. But given the agreement between the two that we are going to shift to an active pattern early next week, I am somewhat confident that we'll be dealing with some sort of storm system Monday through Wednesday, perhaps a quick hitting 1-2, where multiple systems come through in quick succession over 72 hours. Now, just based on the forecast we just looked at, I'm not seeing systems quite as potent as the one we just dealt with here on Monday in terms of rain, wind, and flooding impacts, but it could still be an impactful system on top of what is already a stressed hydrology and flood cleanup that's ongoing across California right now. If we want to look out beyond that, we'll go ahead and look at the ECMWF ensemble. This is looking at the jet stream forecast from that European ensemble for way out. Now we're talking about a week and a half, all the way to next Monday. This is looking toward the end of March 27th now. And while there's never huge signals on the ensembles at this range, we're looking this far out, 288 hours into the forecast, beyond 10 days here, I'm not seeing a strong signal of an extended Pacific jet stream. That's good news if we're trying to avoid additional atmospheric river pineapple express types of events. You're just not seeing a strong signal of an extended Pacific jet from Japan through Hawaii up toward California. Now, what we are seeing on this is perhaps some hint of a Gulf of Alaska, Eastern Pacific type of trough. We saw this earlier in the year in February, which was another way we can bring rainfall to the Pacific Northwest or even to California. If these troughs dip down enough and amplify enough, they can bring precipitation and snowfall. They tend to be cooler events, relatively speaking, so snow levels tend to decrease a bit as a result or descend down the elevation. If I go over to the GFS ensemble for the same time period, March 26th and March 27th, again, we just don't see a very strong signal for an extended Pacific jet atmospheric river type event, but there's that same Pacific trough we're keeping an eye on here, some potential of that developing at the end of March. That would likely limit the chances for, like I said, another atmospheric river type event, but wouldn't necessarily yield a dry end of March for the West. If anything, it might be a little bit wetter in the Pacific Northwest with some lingering rainfall in the northern half of central or northern California. Could be good news if we're trying to bring even more water in to the Pacific Northwest and some of the areas which were still dealing with drought. I showed you just a few slides ago. Look at the ECMWF ensemble precipitation anomaly forecast for that last week in March. This is looking at March 30th and the 7 days before that. We can see that story is pretty consistent with that jet stream forecast here. As a result of that Eastern Pacific troughing off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, we're bringing rainfall in here into Oregon, Washington, perhaps the northern Colorado Rockies here, and the northern half of California as well. Not as potent of an event, a little bit cooler of an event, not necessarily a warm atmospheric river event, but likely to leave the southern portions of that west region drier as it focuses more of that precipitation, more moisture on the northern half of the region. If If we look at the Climate Prediction Center, their forecast for the next 6 to 10 days, we'd expect that to capture those atmospheric river event potentials next week. And if we look at that, we definitely see that in terms of the precipitation, big bullseye over central California. This is not good news for an area that just saw quite a bit of flooding, evacuation orders, warnings, reservoirs increasing in level here. So keeping a close eye on this one, not expecting it to be quite as potent as the last two events that we saw, but a lot can change over a week, so we'll want to keep a close eye on those forecasts. Temperatures, we typically would expect cooler temperatures with more rain, more cloudiness, more cold fronts, more low pressure systems moving through, so not a surprise to see a strong below average temperature signal for that next week time period, looking out March 21st and the few days beyond here next week. If we look to the 8 to 14 days, that's looking out again toward that time period where we saw more of a focus on the Pacific Northwest, less extension of that subtropical component of the Pacific jet and more of just kind of general troughiness off the Pacific Northwest. We'd expect some more of the precipitation signal to shift north, I would say. And if we go ahead and look at the precipitation anomaly map for that 8 to 14 days, I think we see a general agreement from our friends at the Climate Prediction Center, where Washington, Oregon, Northern California shifted more toward that bullseye, but not a super strong signal in terms of flooding or impactful events here. It does include Central California and kind of that first level of above average precipitation, but again, not a particularly strong signal. And then drier further south as well. Temperatures remaining cooler. That makes sense as well. As we get these systems out of the northwest, they tend to be cooler than some of these warm atmospheric river events. So I think that's consistent as well. Beyond that kind of end of March timeframe, we talked in the last video how we might be seeing finally a relief from kind of the onslaught. And I think we're kind of seeing that here in this forecast. And if we look out even beyond that into April, the ECMWF weeklies just came out a few days ago. This is looking from March 25th to April 25th, precipitation anomalies. We are seeing that signal of a drier western U.S., drier in California, at least through the first 3 weeks of April. So that signal has actually gotten stronger dry signal now out of the ECMWF, partly due to the ECMWF, or the MJO, I should say, the Madden-Julian oscillation resetting, we think, into null space or perhaps out in the Indian Ocean, helping to shut off the atmospheric river hose, which has been just pumping moisture and events and storms into California over the last 2 to 3 weeks, it feels like. If we jump back to the Climate Prediction Center and we ask it what it's thinking for the week 3 to 4 time period, we do see now a drier signal over California, Nevada, and Arizona, tending to agree with the signal that we're seeing with the ECMWF. So that's our thinking right now. Again, anytime we're talking about a month out in terms of the forecast, confidence isn't extremely high. But right now I'm feeling about as confident as I could be in terms of just thinking we are going to shift out of that wetter pattern in April. We'll see where that happens as we get into the next month here. Temperatures over that same time period, wanting to get into kind of a sea surface temperature conversation here. Again, this is March 25th through April 25th. If I jump this out to the 30-day, I'll line up those two windows here. March 25th through April 25th, that same period we looked at for precipitation where it was drier across the west. The ECMWF keeping temperatures cooler across the west. And that even extends across western Canada. It even extends across the southern half, really, of Alaska. In fact, you can see colder temperatures extending off the United States all the way through the far eastern Pacific and encompassing much of the western half of the U.S. and lower 48. I think what we're seeing here in this monthly temperature forecast, March 25th out 30 days, is a reflection of the current sea surface temperatures. Sometimes the forecast modeling can be that simple, where we have these cool waters situated off the west coast of the North American continent. That's our negative PDO that we've seen for quite a while now. Now that negative PDO, these cooler waters off the west coast of the United States, it makes sense that that would tend to keep things cooler in the western portion of the United States. So for California, Washington, Oregon, maybe even parts of the interior as well, the signal gets a bit weaker in that regard. So it makes some sense that we're seeing that in terms of the forecast, expecting it to be cooler as we go out into the future here. Now, what might be changing with those sea surface temperatures, I think, is important for the summer forecast, because I have some confidence as a result of just looking at those temperatures now. They're cooler. We can expect it to be cooler over the next 30 days or 40 days or so. But if I take these sea surface temperature forecasts from the ECMWF, make it valid as of where we're at today, March 2023, we can see those cool waters south of Alaska, extending off the west coast of the U.S. Again, that's that negative PDO that we've been talking about, where you have warm waters north of Hawaii, cool waters off the coast of the U.S. As I take this out into April, again, forecasting cooler temperatures, we still see those cool waters off the west coast. Take it into May of 2023, then into June and July, we see two things. Losing that cold signature off the west coast of the U.S., perhaps a weakening of that PDO signature, but we're also seeing this warm tongue of ocean temperature stretch across the Pacific and the equatorial region. That is El Niño, or the forecast, at least from the ECMWF here, of an aggressive return to El Niño conditions in the Pacific for summer, maybe mid to late summer of 2023. So we're warming up the ocean temperatures over in the Pacific Ocean. That's the closest ocean we have here to us in the western United States. If we look at the Climate Prediction Center, their forecasted temperatures for 2023, June, July, and August, not a huge surprise to see a warmer temperature forecast for that time period, at least for the western half of the United States. Also looking at a potentially drier summer for the far northwest, so Washington, parts of Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. That signal tends to line up with El Niño. We tend to have less precipitation, all else equal, in the northwest. Not a super strong correlation there, but it does exist. So not a surprise to see as a result of that forecast from ECMWF, warmer temperatures in the western half of the U.S. and less rainfall predicted, at least right now, across the Pacific Northwest just this summer. And we've been talking about that El Niño forecast. We're still in kind of that 60% probability of entering an El Niño. But again, if we do get into that El Niño in 2023 and stick in it through winter, sometimes we might sneak into El Niño and come back out of it going into the winter months. But if we stay in it through the winter of 2023, that would tend to promote a wetter year for central Southern California, parts of Nevada, and parts of Arizona as well. Whether that holds true for the Pacific Northwest is less the case. Again, there's a slight drier signal there in terms of the correlation, but other factors can bring precipitation into there and winter. We'll get into the details of that later in the year when we have better confidence in that INSO forecast, but this is the signal that we're keeping an eye on now. I wanted to share it with all of you. That's all I have for today. Thank you all for watching.